How's it going, everybody? This is Cameron White with White Light Astrology, giving you guys your September 2019 horoscope for Scorpio, Sun, and Rising. Thank you guys so much for being here and liking and sharing and commenting and subscribing. I love and appreciate every single one of you guys, and I'm so glad you could be here with me today. Starting September off, we have Mars conjoining the Sun in Virgo. Now, as you guys should know, Mars is the planet of action, drive, intentions. It's where we're being energized. You guys are ruled by Mars since you guys are Scorpios. However, Mars is also a malefic planet. Mars brings anger. Mars brings frustrations. It heats things up. It severs. It cuts. And while Mars is in Virgo, Mars is looking to more focus on the analytics and be more detailed, focused, and oriented. Mars is looking to kind of cross all of its T's, dot all of its I's, and put all of its ducks in a row. But while Mars conjoins the Sun, this is when Mars's energy in essence gets purified. Mars is kind of getting cleaned up and put on a pedestal in a sense to kind of be looked at. And so while Mars is conjoining the Sun, this is definitely a good time to kind of just get your thoughts together with a plan of action, with what you're doing, with where you're wanting to direct your energy. But what's important is that Mars is conjoining the Sun in your 11th house. Now, the 11th house is all about friendships and collective groups of people. And so what I see important about this is while Mars is conjoining the Sun in that area, where are you focused on when it comes to your friendships, and where are you finding more problems, and where are you wanting to actually spend more of your energy involved in bigger groups of people? Then on September 3rd, we have Mercury conjoining the Sun, which is a little bit more important because Mercury rules the sign of Virgo. That's Mercury's home where Mercury can do whatever it wants. And while Mercury is in Virgo, this is a time where we could speak a little bit clearer, have our ideas a little bit more thoughtful and more concise. Now, as Mercury's conjoining the Sun, the same idea, it's getting purified by fire, there's a light being brought to it, and as Mercury's conjoining the Sun, this is Mercury. We're talking about our thoughts, we're talking about our communication, we're talking about vocalizing our ideas, and while Mercury's conjoining the Sun in Virgo in its home sign, this looks like a really good time to communicate what needs to be said, or if you've been trying to find the right words for something, you may find it now, because while this is in your 11th house, this is talking about, reaching out to friends. Where do you want, to communicate more with your friends, have better ideas with your friends, short plans with your friends. There's a lot of focus on, and it's not just friends. The 11th house is social groups. This can be collective groups within your workplace, within your hobbies, or anything that involves a bigger group of people. And so while Mercury's conjoining the Sun, this is a good time to extend communication there, vocalize things, get some ideas planned out. And, I think a good way to look at it too would be just be kind of like saying what needs to be said in the sense of having direct communication with those people. Now, from September 4th through September 7th and 10th, we're going to be having Venus oppose Neptune, Mercury oppose Neptune, and the Sun oppose Neptune, all within a few days. And I kind of want to hit on this sequence all in one. And while Venus is in Virgo, Venus, the planet of love and value, beauty, connection, money, indulgence, she's in your 11th house where, you're wanting to connect with friends, but while Venus is in the sign of Virgo, she's in her sign of fall, meaning she doesn't really operate all too well here. And Venus in Virgo is really focusing on the specific tasks at hand that she really values and wants to go for. However, Venus can kind of get overwhelmed with all of the little specific tiny things that she wants to do and may not be able to put 100% effort into all of the creative adventures that Venus has. So while Venus opposes Neptune, this is going to be a really good time to look at where you're placing your value in when it comes to the specifics. Neptune is the planet of illusion and fantasy, and it is dreamy and it is kind of pretty, but while Neptune can cause some confusion and some duality, with it being in your 5th house of what you want, it can be kind of hard to really know what exactly you want with your friends or what exactly you're trying to reach out to. While Venus opposes Neptune, this is kind of a time of taking off that shadow and kind of being able to perceive a little bit more deeper into the truth of what it is that you want, what it is that you value within these friendships, and what direction that's going to take you into. As Mercury opposes Neptune, it goes from a feeling or a value shift to a mental shift. Because you have to remember Mercury is in its home sign. It is combust, meaning it's underneath the beams of the sun, which makes Mercury not as, potent as it could be. It's not as useful. It's kind of, being burnt up. We can't really see what's going on. But as Mercury's in Virgo, kind of being a little bit more clear, having better thoughts about things, As it opposes Neptune, this is kind of getting the mental clarity and, being able to see both sides of the story of, what you want to pursue and with what, group of people you involve yourself with. And this is, again, that mental shift of being able to know where you want, being more direct of where you want to put yourself in. Now, as the Sun opposes Neptune, this is going from a value change to a mental change. And I say change as in, once you realize something, you could change your opinion, and that's kind of like the Neptune opposition. But as the Sun opposes Neptune, this is where things can still get a little bit blurry and still a little bit confusing here. But this is it playing out in the real world experience. Kind of like, we have that value shift, that mental shift. Now this is kind of like seeing it play out in your life. And so I think this is going to be a time of really looking at who you're involving yourself with. And is this what you really want? And that's not to say that's a good or a bad thing, but it's just a question to ask yourself. Then on September 13th is when Mercury conjoins Venus in Virgo. And this is pretty positive because while Venus is in Virgo kind of, wanting to have a good time, it can be kind of struggling with that a little bit because, there's so many specifics, there's so many things Venus wants to do, and it just gets a little bit overwhelmed and has analysis paralysis. Mercury here is expressing the voice of Venus, as to say. And Mercury, while it's in Virgo, it's clear, it's cut, it's to the point, it's black and white. And Mercury conjoining Venus is speaking out that message. And I think that this is going to be a time of really understanding and having that, harmony of where your feelings are when it comes to what you value and what you want to enjoy versus where your mind's at. And kind of getting that connection of like, hey, I'm starting to get the right idea of where I'm placing my value when it comes to my friendships and it comes to the people that I hang out with. I think this is also going to be a time if you have friends and maybe you haven't reached out to them, they'll be reaching out to you. But also on September 13th is when we have the full moon in Pisces. Now, a full moon is when you have both of the luminaries lighting things up, giving you the ability to see what the fuck is going on. And this is happening in the sign of Pisces, where Pisces is kind of like mixing logic with emotion and kind of blending it all up. It's ruled by Jupiter, so there's no boundaries here. It's kind of limitless with that. And this is in your 5th house of love and not necessarily relationships, but like romance and sex and children and hobbies, creativity. And I think that this full moon is going to be a really fun time to really look at, hey, who are you connecting yourself with and are you enjoying what that connection is bringing you? Then on September 14th, as Mercury and Venus are still conjoining each other, they're going to simultaneously ingress into Libra and enter your 12th house. Now, a couple things change up with this. While Mercury was in its home sign, it's now going into Libra, which it doesn't, it's not in fall or detriment, it just is in the sign of Libra. But Venus goes from its sign of fall into its domicile, where we're talking about Venus's territory, her home sign, where Venus can express her natural, expressions, clearly and accessibly. And while Venus goes into Libra, this is kind of focusing the shift on balance. And I know that's a very, catchy word for Libra, but I think it's going to play out, I think that's a good word to use for you guys specifically. As both Mercury and Venus go into Libra, we're looking at not so much on the focusing on the details, but more of balancing things out, having a little bit more diplomacy, delegating things more. But what's more important is that Mercury and Venus both enter your 12th house. Now, the 12th house is an interesting place. It rules hidden enemies, seclusion, and isolation. It rules repressed and unacknowledged parts of yourself. It's kind of like that part of your chart where you go to find your own healing and to be away from the world. And while Mercury and Venus both go into this place, you start to see this vibe kind of coming from, being so active with your social groups and your friends to being a little bit more isolated and by yourself. But I think that this is just really about balancing time with your friends and time with the people that you love with also giving enough self-care for you. Also on September 14th, we're going to have Mars oppose Neptune. And while Mars is still in Virgo, kind of like having a lot of energy for your friends and, taking the time and doing all the specific things that you want to do, as Mars opposes Neptune, this is kind of like that switch of, energy of where you're directing it of, hey, I'm starting to see where this makes more sense and where this doesn't make sense for me to put my energy and time into. And yeah, Mars is still in Virgo, it's still in your 11th house, so you could still be dealing with some frustrations with your group of friends. But as Mars opposes Neptune, this is being more clear and not being so wrapped up in, the confusion and the insanity of it all. Then on September 18th, Saturn finally stations direct. Now, Saturn's been retrograde for the past few months, and when Saturn's retrograde, this is handing us a lot of, responsibilities. We're having to, the walls and the problems that Saturn brought to us in its direct motion. we kind of had to handle all of that while it was retrograde. And now that Saturn's stationing direct, we have to take what we learned through our trials and tribulations while Saturn was retrograde and actually apply them to real world experiences. Now, Saturn is transiting your third house, and the third house rules a lot of different things. The third house is all about our communication, our writing style, has to do with our siblings, short distance travel, our neighbors, people within our close proximity. It's also about learning, teaching. The third house just has a lot going on in it. Now, a good way to look at the third house is looking at the first and the second. Being the first house is who you are, the second house is what you have, the third house is how I use it. I'm probably sound like a broken record saying that, but while Saturn stations direct, it really is about really utilizing the responsibilities and the lessons that you were taught during this time and actually putting them to paper. And I think that that's going to be kind of big for you guys as you guys start to actually take on more responsibilities and take on, more, or I should say, have more self-discipline in order to kind of conquer what you're wanting to do. And then on September 21st is when we're going to have Jupiter square Neptune. Now, this is pretty positive for you guys because it's in your second house, but Jupiter squaring Neptune for the third and final time I think is really important because this is where Jupiter's opportunity of being able to, have the truth prevail over the, miscommunication, the lies, the deception that Neptune can bring up. And Jupiter here is kind of like, hey, if you want to create something, if you're wanting to be optimistic about something, this is the time to believe in it. This is the time to have faith in it. And I think while Jupiter squares Neptune, this is kind of being like, you know what, fuck it. Even though I don't know all the answers, I don't know what the end of the road is going to look like, I'm going to remain to have faith in who I am and what I'm doing, that these things are going to turn out this way. And you'll start seeing more positive, things from Jupiter happening. And that looks like, money. Jupiter's in your second house and it's stationing direct. So that's receiving more money, being able to have more resources, more value. The second house is also what we physically own. So this could be coming into, coming across more possessions, more things that you've been wanting to buy. But at the end of the day, this really is about money. So you may find yourself in a more comfortable position there. Then on September 23rd, the sun moves into Libra, and now the main luminary, the light that gives us life, is moving into your 12th house of seclusion, of isolation, of alienation, of repressed and unacknowledged parts of ourselves. So while we have the sun, Mercury, and Venus here, you're doing a lot of self-reflecting here, and I think that's bringing up a two-sided question of there's this and there's that, and I don't think right now for you guys there's a right or a wrong answer, but it's really about balancing the two out of what are you, not acknowledging and what needs to be brought up and what needs to be taken care of versus what isn't necessarily a problem anymore, what needs to be let go of. And then on September 25th is when we have Venus squaring Saturn. Now, I bring this transit up because this is usually a pretty rough transit. But what I find important about this is that Venus is in its domicile sign, Saturn's in its domicile sign, but Venus is in the superior position here where it has a little bit more say-so over Saturn. And while Venus is in Libra, wanting to connect, wanting to build bridges, wanting to, just have fun and, and doing it through like social interactions that make sense, that are elegant, that are beautiful. And she's doing that in your 12th house of, of yourself, of things that you haven't realized. And I think Venus is kind of bringing an opportunity to see things in a more of a peaceful light. And as Venus squares Saturn, where Saturn's in your third house kind of going like, no, you can't do that, or no, you can't go out of your way, you're kind of stuck right here. I think this is a big time to really look at what opportunities lay ahead of you if you can kind of have a little bit more of a balance and a little bit more softer view on how you see yourself and how you take care of yourself and how you just kind of go about everything. But then we end September with the new moon in Libra, and this is happening on September 28th, and this is happening in your 12th house again. And I think this is a really good time for, you to kind of just take a look at yourself, take heed of what you need, take stock of the things that you've got to take care of. But while this is in Libra, this is about balancing. And, you guys are Scorpios. It's easy to be super deep on one side of things, and maybe you can take this as a time to be a little bit more subtle and easygoing. The new moon is when you have both the luminaries in the same sign, so everything's kind of focused on one thing, and this is focused on Libra and your 12th house, so this may be a good time to, again, take some stock for yourself, be by yourself, be isolated for a minute, go on your own healing journey or whatever, but really look at what needs to be balanced out and being able to see both sides of the coin. And with that being said, that's what I got for you guys for this month. I'm super excited to talk to you guys next month about October, but with that being said, Thank you guys so much for being here and liking and sharing and commenting and subscribing. I love and appreciate every single one of you guys, and I'll be seeing you next month.